Alright guys, so the US is one step closer to losing the semiconductor war. Now every time the administration takes one step forward, they then take gigantic leaps backwards. And what Trump just did was to bury the US semiconductor industry. In the same breath, he basically gave China the keys to the kingdom. The future of tech progress, the advantage has firmly swung into China's favor. Now just a day ago, the US went ahead to ban Harvard from enrolling foreigners. Now, sure enough, chaos ensued and international students were left scrambling. Now, imagine getting to Harvard and now you are about to be kicked out and jammed into a random university. There's also financial chaos going on. Trump has also frozen more than $2.6 billion worth of Harvard's funding and future grants are also gone. Now, this goes deep into the heart of academia and just brutalizes one of America's last few advantages on the world stage. And really think about it, apart from technology and Hollywood, only US universities are still somewhat world class. Well, we can kiss that goodbye because Trump is about to trigger a massive brain drain from the US. Now, Besson has confirmed that Trump will move ahead on the tax threat to Harvard. The school sits on an endowment of more than $50 billion and that partially funds the school, and all that can be taxed down the road. So Harvard is facing two big crises. 27% of their entire student body comes from international students, and that's an incredible amount of paying customers that could take their business elsewhere. And if we throw in federal sponsored research, Harvard's finance is facing a big crunch. Almost a third of revenue will get impacted, and here's the big problem. Less funding will mean less breakthroughs. A less diverse student body will have less talent and brilliant ideas. Sure, a US court has blocked the ban for now, but the damage has already been done. This is especially so for the chip war. Trying to go head to head with China isn't easy. The US is on the brink of losing their advantage, and this goes well beyond tariffs. You need smart people to come to the US and eventually work there, but Trump is still defending his ban in the most bizarre way.
Why would you not want the best and brightest from around the world to come,
I do.
to come to Harvard?
I do, but a lot of the people need remedial math. Did you see that? Where the students can't add 2 and 2 and they go to Harvard. They want remedial math, and they're going to teach remedial math at Harvard. No, wait a minute. So why would they get in? How can somebody that can't add or has very basic skills, how do they get into Harvard? Why are they there?
Now this is crazy. There's a reason why Harvard admits foreign students. It's because the test scores are off the chart, especially those from Asia. But as we said before, there are blowback effects to this. Now the big winner from this chaos is none other than China. Just within the country, fewer students will be heading to the US now. They would rather just continue their education within China or Hong Kong itself. In 2022, China was already a world leader in research and publications in chips. In terms of overall publications, those widely cited and quality-based Chinese universities led the world. The US comes in at a close second, but this gap will only continue to grow in the years to come. US policy is now encroaching into academia, and no student wants to get thrown out halfway through their semester. Now, papers and articles are the first step towards patents, and eventually patents they get adopted by companies like Huawei, turning them into actual products. And now that Trump wants to cut away federal funding to Harvard, this will impact R&D. And should this extend to other universities, the level and quantity of breakthroughs in the US will also collapse. And what's scary is the leading organizations of chip research today. According to the Georgetown Emerging Tech Observatory, China is dominating the world. And it's not just quantity. The top cited research in the top 8 of the top 10 are all from Chinese universities. From Tsinghua all the way to Peking University, local schools have the ability to outcompete the US. And this puts America in a very vulnerable position. If American schools don't have the funding as students are leaving, where will leading research come from? Don't expect companies to do it. They are already fighting tooth and nail for market share. Companies like Nvidia and Intel are where research and theories become reality. But without the building blocks of innovation, where are you going to get the latest advancements in the chip war? China, for example, is already experimenting on light-based optical chips. Researchers at Tsinghua are using light instead of electricity to process data. And if this works, it will change how AI will work in various applications. Now, this kind of work can't be done in companies. They have to be done in universities where students have a ton of time and labor is cheap. And that's the whole purpose of university research faculties in the first place, isn't it? So you can see the big difference between the American approach and the Chinese approach. The US is trying to hurt competitors through sanctions and now blocking foreign students from a US education. But this is just going to backfire royally. Now, when comparing the future of the tech war, we have to look at the trends because Chinese research is heading up, but US research is plunging to the underworld. From 2018 to 2023, China leads the world in terms of semiconductor research. Over 160,000 articles, double that of the US, accounting for 34% of global share. Now, we know that China has far more STEM graduates than the US, and now this is reflected directly in the R&D. China's growth here is 41% over the last 5 years, while the US footprint has actually contracted by 17%. Too few students are entering technology and science. So do you think Trump's Harvard ban is going to help, or do you think it's going to worsen the situation? It's so ridiculous that even Europe now is trying to grab researchers from the US from this huge misstep. Investing in science and tech is the future, and even the Europeans can see this but not Trump. Now, Europe is moving to pump €500 million worth of funding to grab US scientists. Now, granted, it's not a lot of money, but know the playbook that other big powers like the Middle East and China can now follow. If the US doesn't want to pay to play, we'll step in and fund the scientists. And once the breakthroughs come, all the spoils of the chip war will remain with our companies. Now, scientists are also human beings looking to make a living. And if Huawei opens up new R&D campuses, we can be sure this will be filled to the brim. So Trump really made a big misstep here. But let's talk about something even more urgent and pressing. Now, we said before that US allies will be facing horrific deals going ahead. The administration couldn't punish China, so they will take it out on other trading partners. And guess what? We were right. Trump is now going to punish the Eurozone. And here's how insane this is. China's tariff rate is at 30%, but Europe is about to get hammered at 50%.
What are you hoping to achieve with a 50% tariffs on the?
Well, I think this is there is no tariff because what they'll do is they'll send their companies into the U.S. and build their plant. You know, we have I guess over $12 trillion practically committed. You look at other presidents; they haven't had $1 trillion for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. If they build their plant here, then they have no tariff at all.
Are you looking for a deal in 9 days? Will you be able to do that, sir?
I'm not looking for a deal. I mean, we've set the deal. It's at 50%. But again, there is no tariff if they build their plant here.
So Trump has made it crystal clear. There's no deal to be had. The tariff will be set at 50%. Take it or leave it. And even if Europe protests, it might stay at 50% indefinitely. Now the plan is mighty simple. He wants Europe to move their industries to the US, to ship away what's left of EU manufacturing back to America. And I hate to say it, the 50% tariff could be very effective. Now, input costs into the Eurozone is astoundingly high. They still have an energy crisis, so margins, they are all razor thin. Europe is extremely exposed to trade with the US. Let's not forget about that. The Eurozone sends over 20% of the external exports to the US. And that's incredible dependency that could collapse with a 50% tariff. And here's the real agenda. The EU has a persistent trade surplus. They collectively sell more goods and services to the world than they bring in. Last year alone, the surplus hit almost 4% of EU GDP. The US, in contrast, runs a persistent trade deficit of 3% or more. This is unsustainable, but to reverse this, the US plans to drag EU industries underwater. Now, I call this the Count Dracula strategy, draining your industrial capacity for our benefit. And here's how structurally damaging this is. A 50% tariff will decimate Europe. Their own exports are already competing with giants like China who can out-manufacture the world. And not every company can move to the US. It could cost billions, and US policy keeps changing. The goalposts just keep shifting. And to move exports to other parts of the world, EU companies, they have to slash prices. There's no way around it. Almost immediately after the announcement, share prices of all EU car makers collapsed, and it makes sense. There's no way for companies like Volkswagen or BM to absorb the 50% tariff. Their profit margins are 6 to 8% at best, so without a doubt, sales of cars into the US will collapse. The American consumer will be too broke to buy an exported car from Europe or any car actually. They just don't have the money as prices goes higher. Now this is an ultimatum to Europe. Send over your car factories and build in the US or lose the American market forever. And the threats just get worse. If we listen to Besson, he wants countries in the Eurozone to break apart and negotiate directly with the US. So the strategy has shifted. The China containment plan is on ice. Deindustrializing Europe is now on the menu.
I would hope that this would light a fire under the EU because, Bill, I've said before, EU has a collective action problem here. It's 27 countries, but they're being represented by this one group in Brussels. So some of the feedback that I've been getting is that the underlying countries don't even know what the EU is negotiating on their behalf.
Now, Besson is really playing with fire here. Playing divide and conquer with your own ally is very dangerous in a global trade war, and it looks like Europe is about to collapse, but if you push them too hard, things can really flip. Now, there are so many ways the EU can put a squeeze on the US, and let's go beyond just taxing digital services. That is mighty obvious. And let's talk about the true Achilles heel of the US economy, and that's their financial markets. The US has a borrowing and spending problem. The 10-year premium is about to hit a full percentage point, the highest in modern history, and that means investors are losing confidence fast. Borrowing costs across the country is surging and the economy is under enormous pressure. Now, what does the EU have? Collectively, they hold over $2 trillion in US Treasury bonds, and they have been the biggest buyer of American debt. Now, this is a card they could always play. After all, just from a trade basis alone, if exports to the US collapse, where are the dollars going to come from? And without dollars, where is the money needed to recycle any trade surplus into treasury bonds? It's amazing that Besson didn't factor this into his own calculations. A 50% tariff on EU goods into the US will also ramp up the inflation pain. And thanks to Trump's collective punishment, a lot of consumer goods and inputs will hit unthinkable prices. Now, the EU doesn't just export LV bags or French liquor and perfumes. The 5 biggest exports will make prices across the US fly up. Medicine, machinery, chemicals, automotive, and electrical exports will all cost 50% more. So either the importers and consumers eat the tariff or EU supply to the US will collapse. Either way, prices will go up. So how is this good for consumer budgets? More importantly, how is this good for existing companies in the US? Any country moving factories over there have to ask a very serious question. If I spend $1 billion building something in the US and my input costs are incredibly high, can US consumers afford what I'm selling? And could Trump also U-turn everything a month later? So this move against the EU is definitely damaging to Europe, but that doesn't mean the US will get away scot-free either. In fact, the damage might be even worse. But as always, let me know what you think. Has the US crippled their own semiconductor war? And will the EU retaliate or just accept the pain? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.